So, there is a transition that's taking place. From the first speaker, you heard a lot about the outstanding work that's going on in his own lab. In the second one, you heard a little bit more about what's happening around that lab and in the environment. I'm going to talk about the general area as such of biofuels, because I think that there are many, many misconceptions, and we are not going to solve all of those problems. I thought that the title of the series is quite appropriate from my point of view, because a lot of people are asking this question now: where is my jet fuel? And a lot of people are asking the question which is central to what we are discussing today, which is, why is innovation taking so long? And I will argue actually that innovation has not taken long. A lot of innovations have taken place, but what we are really looking for is deployment of those innovations in the marketplace and in people's life. Okay, so that's the issue, and I'd very much like to discuss that with you at very few slides. This is the only thing that has anything to do with what we do in the lab. So my lab studies photosynthesis. We study photosynthesis in bugs that are microbes, and they are called cyanobacteria. And then the same photosynthetic process also takes place in green plants and eukaryotic algae. This process itself, and I'll quickly come to the point of why we are even talking about this process when we are talking about biofuels. Maybe it's not obvious to everybody, but let me indulge on what I'm saying right now. This process was invented, so to say, in nature only once, and very early on. Only a few 100 million years after this planet was formed, this amazing process was invented, and it was invented in these bugs, the ones that we study, cyanobacteria, one of its progenitors. And the process is the following: light, which we have a lot, and that's the ultimate source of energy from the sun; carbon dioxide, which earlier on there was not that much, then times came when there was a lot, and then it went down, and right now we are making it every which way possible to make it go up to the highest level possible. Okay? And then the invention that these microbes made in comparison to the other photosynthetic microbes that already existed is that they found a very readily available source of electrons, and that's water. Okay? It's very difficult from a chemical point of view of breaking open water to make oxygen. These bugs figured out how to do it. It has happened only once, and we are still trying to figure out the exact details of how that happens. This is a very green, clean reaction, right? It takes up carbon dioxide. It makes this byproduct that's very good for all of us. Without this, we would not have evolved. And it makes good stuff. Carbohydrates is the only thing that I'm showing here, but please remember that everything that happens in the biosphere, it starts here. As one of my former colleagues, a sage plant biochemist, Joe Varner, here on the campus, many years ago used to say all the time, plants are primary, everybody else is secondary. And the reason for that is that you and me and every other bug that's not photosynthetic is dependent on that, dependent on what photosynthesis makes. So that's something to keep in mind. Everything else that we talk about, life starts here, and that's not simply because we study this process. Okay? All right. So what is biofuel? This tells you what biofuel is. Steve Mayfield is at San Diego, and this slide is borrowed from him. And in his view, biofuel is using photosynthesis to make fuel. In today's terminology, this will be doing all kinds of using modern tools, many of which you have heard about earlier on today. But basically what happens is that sunlight is stored, in this case in crops, and then You go to this stage, you can see this is all around us, the corn plants that are growing and the kernel. And then you ask the questions about food versus fuel. And we will get into that. That's a big issue as far as, what is ethical, what is not, what kind of policy should be there. And then this is a process that's ancient also. We have known this as human beings, how to do that for a very long time. We take the sugar that's coming out of this, we ferment that into ethanol. And in Steve Mayfield's view, ethanol is a poor fuel product. I'm not going to take that stand, and we can discuss and debate on that issue. It also so happens that other kinds of photosynthetic organisms, in this case, in Steve Mayfield's case, it's algae, which means eukaryotic algae. In my case, it's going to be cyanobacteria. Those are prokaryotic algae. And they also do the same kind of photosynthesis. And in this case, in algae, they make tons and tons of oil. Okay? So this is a very natural process without any perturbation, doing a few tricks, and we have known this for a very long time, that there are certain algae that can accumulate a very large amount of oil that can be used directly, either in this form of putting it in the tank, not as gasoline, but more as diesel, and variations on the theme that we can dream about today because we have all of these beautiful tools of synthetic biology and genomics. But the basic process is this. In a very natural kind of process, we can produce this type of molecules. Okay. Now we always badmouth ethanol. But at the same time, we are always saying, why isn't there more biofuel? Well, I will submit to you, look at these numbers. We have a lot of biofuel around that we use every day. We use every day because we go to the pump and we pump in what we call gasoline, and 10% of it is ethanol. Okay? And that 10%, or the total production of ethanol, is 22.5 billion gallons. And we are going to talk about numbers later on, because I think that's very, very important when we are getting into this mode of production of fuels. Okay. Now the other thing that's going on with the production of biofuel that nowadays we pay a lot of attention to is the business of production of greenhouse gases. How many of us around here, raise your hands, if you do not believe, let me phrase that the right way, that the changes in the climate, humans have a lot to do with it. Is there anybody here who doesn't believe in that? Okay, so I just test it out so that I know where to start from. Okay, so we all agree that making more greenhouse gas gives rise to problems with the climate. And what has happened over the last 15, 20 years, as opposed to 100 years ago, when biofuel really started being used? And I'm not going to go all the historic stuff, probably all of us know. The first time an automobile was run, it was with biofuel. The first time the diesel was used, that was with biodiesel. So we have known, as the human species, the fact that there is biofuel that's readily available, made in this way, and liquid biofuel that can be used for transportation purposes. Okay? What we are facing right now is this unprecedented situation, which is that we know, and most people know, but some people do not agree, that making more greenhouse gas, which is a direct consequence of taking fossil fuel and burning it, which is what we do when we use transportation fuel in today's day, right? That we are challenging our climate, and we have to pay for it for a very, very, very long time in many different ways. In fact, 2 weeks ago, iCares organized a big workshop here on campus that had to do with climate change and human health. Okay, oftentimes we talk about climate change and this and climate change and that. What is becoming very clear, again, in the context of what we discussed earlier on today, is that this kind of greenhouse gas emission is giving rise to all sorts of problems, including those that directly affect our health. So this is something to think about, and people are paying attention to, and these are big issues as far as policies are concerned. Okay. Now, as far as policy goes, a few years ago, people woke up to the fact that ethanol may not be the best form of biofuel. This is the one that has been around for a long time. And we organized, in collaboration with the Weidenbaum Center here on campus, and also the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, we brought together a whole bunch of people here on campus back in 2008 to discuss just that, the economics of ethanol. Okay? And basically, a lot of people agreed on the following, and there are still controversies, is that the net production of energy by going this route of getting ethanol is positive, but slightly positive. We don't get a whole lot of benefit. A lot of people actually say you don't get any benefit, you actually are losing energy from the energy point of view, not from the point of view of the how many dollars and things like that. So there are lots of controversies here, but remember, this is the biofuel that we continue to use. There are many other kinds that research work is going on that tells us that yes, it will be possible to produce many other kinds of biofuels, and we'll talk about a few of those. However, the one that is readily available in the marketplace right now all over the world is this one. So let's keep that in mind. Okay, so this is probably the fourth time during the last century, beginning of this century, that we again woke up to the fact that biology can provide a solution to this problem of not having infinite amount of petroleum reserve, and plants may come to the rescue again. And I say again because if you really think about where the fossil fuels came from, they also came from the process of photosynthesis. We can go back to that and revisit the whole issue. But long time ago, it's this kind of material that was used to form all sorts of fossil fuel, including coal and especially petroleum. So right now, what we are trying to do is finding alternate solutions for the production of fossil fuel. Let me dwell on this one a little bit, which we all know probably are familiar with this concept. In a crop plant, the issue is how do you produce ethanol or any kind of biofuel? And so far what we have done is that we have taken the corn kernel, or from other plants also, the most valuable part, so that we directly compete with food production, right? And this is a no-no. Of course, we don't want to do that. However, plant biologists knew for the longest period of time that majority of the carbon in the plant is stored away in the form of what is called cellulosic material. It actually should be called lignocellulosic material. There are three different kinds of molecules that are there: the cellulose, the hemicellulose, and the lignin. And one thing that's for sure, plants make these things not so that we can make biofuels out of them, but more than this can provide structure as well as defense to the plants, which means these molecules are extraordinarily rigid, and it's very, very difficult to break down these molecules. And that's what we want to do, because these are nothing but sugar residues just tied together in very, very long chains. And so the idea is that if we can break down those long chains of sugar residues down to the form of small number of sugar residues, maybe monomers or dimers, then we know what to do with it, because then we can just use those, just like we have used sugar from corn kernel or any other kernel, and put them through the fermentation process and make tons and tons of ethanol or whatever other kind of biofuel. Well, in order to do that, what was found out is that the previous 50 years, research in the area of plant cellulosic material was underfunded. There were only a few people who were studying this extremely recalcitrant material called cellulosic material, right? So as a result, we did not know the rules of the game of what are the different kinds of enzymes that can break down this type of material. And the good thing that has happened over the last 10 years, and I will be happy to discuss with you more, is that people have taken lessons from the nature. We know things like termite. We know that inside inside a cow, this type of material is digested, and they are digested because of the microbes that are around. And it's because those microbes have enzymes who know how to very efficiently take the cellulosic material and break it down so that those microbes can get their nutrition directly from the cellulosic material. So we want to go in there. We want to learn from nature. And there are 3 very large bioenergy research centers that have been established some 6 years ago in 3 different parts of the country. And a lot of people are getting together. And majority of the work is aimed at this. What are the different microbial processes that can be used to break down these extremely recalcitrant cellulosic material? Along with that comes another aspect that we will probably have time to discuss at the very end. At one level, this is a chemical engineering problem. At another level, it's a problem that's directly related to agriculture. So keep that thought going, and I will come back to that if we have time. In parallel, another group of people, they are saying, why even use plants, crop plants, rather use algae. Algae do photosynthesis, and here is a cartoon diagram, basically, even though it looks like a real picture. Basically what it shows is that here are photobioreactors, essentially plastic bags, in which algae are growing. And right there, back there, is a power plant. This is a coal-fired power plant that produces carbon dioxide. That's the food for this algae, and there is a lot of sunlight. This is Arizona. And the idea is that, at least in this kind of cartoon diagram, is that we can use all of this, the sunlight and the CO2, grow lots and lots of algae, and those algae will then produce the biofuels. Okay? Now, here on campus, we have a much better facility that was established some 5 years ago now, where there is, inside one of the engineering school buildings, there is a large experimental power plant that's about 1 megawatt power plant, and co-resident are 5 bioreactors that are of the most advanced kind. And the question that are being asked in that facility is directly what kind of emission is taking place from this kind of an experimental power plant, what is good for an algae, what kind of algae can grow under those conditions, and all that type of stuff. Okay? So the good thing that has happened over the last 6-7 years is that a lot of research work that's going on here. And because of that research work, this is something else that also needs to be kept in mind. It's the same thing when you have algal production. You eat a lot of CO2, and here are some of the numbers. 1 barrel of each gallon of algal oil produced consumes 12 to 15 kilograms of CO2. Okay, so it's good in that sense. Okay, now I'm not going to go into the details of this, but this is kind of a cartoon diagram of what a photosynthetic microbe, an alga, can do for us. Basically, the concept is that you have sunlight, you use water, some nutrients that are necessary, such as nitrate and things like that, and carbon dioxide. You can also use some organic carbon sources. For our purpose, we will not use those. And then, because of all the genomic revolution that has taken place, and we now have over 500 different algal species that have whose genome sequences are known at some level or another, at least 200 with complete genome sequence. We know a lot about processes that are taking place inside these cells. And we know that all of these cells are capable of producing lots of different kinds of molecules. And some of those are potential biofuels. Biodiesel we have already talked about. Here are some other kinds of alcohol. So instead of ethanol, you can use butanol that have some interesting properties. There are some companies that have been formed that are making this molecule in large quantity, but not at the same level as ethanol. So keep that in mind. Isoprene is another one. This is a very good one, and it's a gas when it's produced, but then you can condense it and make biofuel kind of molecules. And then one that in our lab we are studying a lot, these are alkanes. These are called drop-in fuels. These are long-chain hydrocarbons that cyanobacteria make. And these kind of things can directly go into your gas tank. That's why they are called drop-in fuels. Okay? What are the different kinds of approaches that are being used? Bioprospecting, because nature has already provided lots and lots of different kinds of options. So we can go in there, and what Professor Dantas has mentioned earlier on, take the same kind of approach and go and ask the question of who is making what among this group of photosynthetic organisms. And then once we know who is doing what, then we can take our favorite photosynthetic microbe and engineer into it that process that we need to have there, so that some of these biofuels are made. And all of this is going on. There are companies that have been formed, and things are looking really, really good from the research point of view. Lots of new inventions, lots of new patents, a lot of people who are going into business here, and even in town here, there are a number of small companies that have formed around these themes. Okay? So let's now go into the big number issues. And this is where I think we need to think about what needs to be done. Where is my jet fuel? That question. Okay? By the way, jet fuel is just one kind of biofuel that works, is a special kind of biofuel that works in jet engines. Basically, those are the kinds of fuel that do not freeze at low temperature. That's the special property that they need to have. And in fact, it has already been experimentally proven at a large scale that you can take algal fuel and fly an aircraft. This has been done many, many times now by different airline companies. But the important thing is that it's prohibitively expensive right now to procure that kind of fuel and run an aircraft. You know, economically, that's still not a viable thing. Okay, I want to go to these large number issues. Okay, whenever we are talking about energy, we should be thinking about very, very large numbers. Okay, so 15 terawatts is how much energy is being consumed per year today, 2013. Okay, terawatts may not mean much to most of us, so let me try to bring it down to something that we can think about. 15 terawatts is 15,000 gigawatts. A gigawatt is a lot of energy that's produced by, let's say, a nuclear power plant. Okay? Let's say we want to go, we meaning the entire planet, we are going to go completely nuclear. We will produce power only through nuclear power plants. What will that look like? That will look like this. We have to then build and commission 15,000 nuclear power plants. What does that mean? That means 41 years, one nuclear power plant, one every day, that needs to be built and commissioned. How does that compare with where we are right now? In the last 3 decades, there are a handful number of nuclear power plants that have been made in this country because of many reasons. But this is just to give us a way of thinking about it, of how enormous the range is. And the other thing is that by that time, in 40 years, we'll need another 15 terawatts of energy because the world's population is going up and world population will need more and more energy. So that number 15 is today, and the projection is in 40 years that will be 30. Okay? We know all of that energy is available to us, but at low density. That's because we still have the sun. That sunlight falls on Earth's surface, and it's at a very low density or intensity that that energy comes in. But if we could capture it some way, and this is where solar power and all of that is coming in, then we have enough energy. The question is, how are we going to get that? And the answer to that, everybody agrees, is it's not going to be one way or another. It's going to be multiple different sources of energy. And so let me go to the next slide then and talk about transportation fuels. Again, where is my jet fuel? Where is my transportation fuel? And so this is from the International Energy Agency. They just released their report. And let me just point out something that probably we all know. OECD, that's us and Europe, used to have 60% of all the transportation fuel was consumed here back in 1973. And in 2011, other parts of the world are continuing to use more and more and more transportation fuel. And so now our part, this pie is divided into our part being only 41%. However, look at the numbers. This is 4674, and that's 8918. That's about twice the number in this period of time. Okay? What is MTO? 1 million ton oil equivalent. So now I knew that Gautam is going to talk before me. So I was trying to figure out how we can position ourselves in thinking about the range of production. So we just heard about antibiotics, right? And so let's look at production capacity that is needed. Okay, so 10,000 MTOE per year translates into 10,000 billion kilograms of fuel per year, which translates into 10 to the 13 kilograms of fuel per year. That's the number. Okay? And I was also very surprised when I read these reviews. One that Gautam showed is that we actually make a lot of antibiotics, and the review that I read from this year said more than 90% is going into animal feed. Okay? So 10 to the 7 kilograms per year, an astoundingly large number. Okay? So we produce a lot of antibiotics. But as far as production goes, look at the rate differences in scale. And I think this is what we need to keep in mind. The production of fuel can never be equated to the production of specialty chemicals or specialty drugs or high-end, high-value products, because the scales are very, very different. And this is the biggest challenge, I think. I don't think that the innovation at the level of what's happening in a lab, what's happening in large research groups, that's lagging behind. What's lagging behind is bridging the gap. And I will submit to you that transportation fuel production to meet global needs should be at a scale comparable to agriculture. It is really agriculture. Whether we go the algae route or we go the cellulosic route or both or any other combinations of production of biofuels, we need to think about very large scale deployment. Now, where is the problem in there? And I will provide only one way to think about it, and that's the fact that agriculture has developed over thousands of years. Let's say 10,000 years, okay? And we want our biofuel production capacity to go up to the same level all over the world. We are already, kind of saying, where is my jet fuel? That means we wanted this to happen in 10 years. Well, it's not going to happen in 10 years. This will require a very long time, and that's simply because this is a very large problem if we look at the globe. I think that's the end of my presentation, and if we have time, I'd love to discuss this with you. Thank you.
Any questions?
Is there the vehicle design itself, is that part of the equation as well? Not only fuel, but
Yes, absolutely. So I think that as far as the use of transportation fuel, the biggest thing that happened right in front of our eyes that we don't pay much of attention to that, it's the requirement that has been put in now in enhancing the mileage of transportation vehicles that we already use. That is going to give rise to significant change in the amount of fuel that we are going to use. So you are absolutely right. The entire infrastructure, everything that we do, from the point of view, the feedstock, all the way to the use, everything needs to be put into the equation, and this is why it's so difficult to go to that scale. Yeah?
Yeah, the question is, so if we target same end product, say ethanol, it seems to me if I use cellulose, shouldn't be efficient if I use algae. Because what I'm asking is, first, you have to cut the CO2, make it into sugar, and then build up to this bigger long chain cellulose molecule. Eventually, you want to break down again, and then you make it into small sugar molecule. Then the yeast eat this. Well, an algae doesn't build up this cellulose. I'm saying, seems to me that way. Is it true?
Well, from the point of view of basic biology, it's true. But on the other hand, imagine if somebody already gives you the coal or the petroleum that you can use directly. That's kind of equivalent of what's happening with the cellulosic material. Because we are not going to do anything, we have to break it down, that's for sure. But once we know how to do it, people who are going after cellulosic material, that's the objective that they have. Because they don't have to change agriculture. That's already happening. Whereas people who are going after algae, including myself, we have to not only innovate as far as what's being made by algae, but also innovate in collaboration with others who know how to do it, of creating very large plots of land or water where this algae is going to be produced, because scale is important. So there are two things. Again, nothing is going to be only this or only that. It's going to be all of it. Okay? Yeah.
In terms of scale, where does this fit with the development of direct solar power and just storing solar power in batteries and using that energy?
I think that solar power is going to be a fantastic thing when it's available at scale and also at cost. That would be just fantastic. The major problem that biology has solved, and we still are lagging behind with the conventional way we are thinking about solar power, is not the production of power but the storage of the energy. And so again, multiple things have to come together for that to be scalable. And as we read about it, if it is intermittent, then storage somewhere else on the grid. If it is local, then storage right there. All of those are big issues. Biology has solved the problem by sacrificing efficiency.